Now, joining me from the London podcast studios are two professionals, always available for voiceover work. First, we have Popbitch's Chris Lochery. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Excellent. That sounds really good.
I'm not sure I'm that available. Never mind.
So Popbitch has been emailing gossip to hundreds of thousands of people for years and years. Why hasn't it ever been sued? Why is it still going?
A combination of things. Smart lawyers. A very inventive English language. And I think generally being smart about what our sources, about what we say, what we don't say, what we keep back. And I think there's a sort of managed recklessness to it. I think we seem a lot more fresh than we are, but it's all quite considered. So people want to enjoy gossip because gossip can be very malicious, and you want to make sure that everybody sort of feels you've got kind of a responsibility to make sure that you aren't making people party to something that they feel tawdry by touching, or you just want to walk the line where it's, the details are just juicy enough.
I love a bit of managed recklessness. I'm going to remember that line. We'll talk about Russell Brand in a bit, but I was thinking about other people in a bit of trouble. Obviously, Dan Wootton's been covered a lot by Byline Times. Has all those stories been a sort of a long time coming? Have you had lots of those bubble into the Popbitch inbox?
I mean, this has been a big year for a lot of that sort of stuff. There's been a lot of stories that have been kind of years in the making, or certainly years in the whispers, that have all come to light. There's been a bit of a domino effect, I think. The same way we sort of saw with the Me Too era in 2018, just one after the other, people building up. I think Dan Wootton, made a bit of a rod for his own back in going so hard on the Philip Schofield story, because I think a lot of people felt it was hard to get people to talk on the record about that sort of thing. And then I think the sort of brass neck to pontificate so loudly and violently about it all just meant that people who had been wavering as to whether or not to kind of break cover and talk decided, actually, you know what, I have a story about this and I'm going to share it now.
Yeah, and next to Chris, welcome back, Charlotte Tobitt from the Press Gazette. Hi, Charlotte.
Hello, Matt.
Another week, another set of Ofcom complaints for GB News. Did you see the host Bev Turner's outburst on the channel, a little row that she had?
I've never seen anything quite like it, that between two co-presenters on air. It was remarkable. And what's interesting in particular is that since then, the chair of the Culture, Media, Sport Committee wrote to GB News' CEO to say, this undermines your perception of due impartiality. And he has written back to say, well, actually, we were really impartial because we had two people from completely opposite sides of the argument. So it's super, but their spat kind of continued on Twitter. So and people suggesting, if they're that hostile towards each other, can their kind of on-air relationship continue? But so far it is, but probably GB News thinks that dynamic works quite well. It's interesting, and Talk TV have a new breakfast show starting, and they're kind of going for a sort of left-right mix to try and generate that sort of little battle every morning. It was interesting, actually, speaking about GB News, Angelos Frangopoulos, he's the CEO there, when talking about Dan Wootton, he said that he wasn't going to launch an investigation and that they are monitoring serious allegations about the presenter, but none of the allegations have been admitted or proved by an independent body. It sounds like he's sort of outsourcing the investigation, trying keeping it off his TV channel. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a fancy way of saying I'm not going to do anything about it, which I suppose is his prerogative. Hard to defend. I don't think the story's going anywhere, so... Well, a story that's just broken is about Rupert Murdoch stepping back from Fox and News. He's going to become chairman... I've got to get this right. He's going to become chairman emeritus, which sort of means he's still knocking around but not doing a lot of things day to day. That goes to Lachlan. Rupert's been around for a long time. It's probably that sort of 60, 70 years of activity. What do you think his greatest hits are over that time, Charlotte? Oh, blimey. Well, I was rereading an interview that we had with him on Press Gazette back in 2005, and he said that, obviously this was a while ago, but he Rupert thought that his legacy was the Wapping dispute with the unions that kind of moved all of the production from Fleet Street to Wapping and was a major row. And he sort of said, well, that's, that changed the industry and that's kind of all my legacy and it wouldn't have happened otherwise and blah, blah, blah. So that's what he thought.
He definitely had ink running through his veins, didn't he? Obviously ran TV networks, movie studios as well, but it was really the press that got him excited.
I mean, yeah, before he kind of started on running everything, he was a sub-editor, and kind of that was where he got his first taste of news. And you can tell, like, it's always clear that he was passionate about titles like The Sun and The Times and The New York Post. And that's why there's always been stories about, how involved is he in their editorial decisions, and it's because he's clearly like really passionate about it still, and that's why he's kept going even though he's 92 now. And it's almost 70. I think it was 1954 that he first sort of took on papers in Australia, and then obviously built up the empire since. Had a massive impact on kind of this opinionated talk broadcasting, because we know most recently Talk TV in the UK, but obviously Fox News in the US and Sky News Australia we sometimes forget about over here, but that's kind of the same deal and massive over there.
Chris, Lachlan's taken over. Is he just a chip off the old block?
Well, he was always the heir apparent, wasn't he? I think.
Has he won the succession?
It seems kind of boring now as a result. We've had 4 years of this, and the coverage. There was a great piece in Vanity Fair a few months ago, Gabriel Sherman piece, about how dramatic and crazy it all been with all the the previously unreported details about the extent of his injuries and what happened on that yacht when he knocked his head. And so just to hand over to Lachlan does feel slightly unsatisfying. A couple of hours after having heard the news, think, was that what we've been building to? 70 years of this sort of thing. I
was reading a little bit online today, and they're saying, Lachlan may be in charge now. Rupert still is sort of the main shareholder, and obviously his family own big chunks of that business. And when he isn't around, that will probably kick off the real succession of that business. Yeah,
I think there's certainly among the kids, there's a bit of a kind of Lachlan and the others dynamic building, which, again, yes, much like Succession. But I think, people like James, I don't know how involved Prue is, but Liz as well, just having an idea they kind of want to be rid of some of the more toxic elements of the empire. Sort of sell it off or just shut them down. And I think Lachlan is a, continuity Keith.
Yes, absolutely. We mentioned it earlier. Obviously, one of the big stories this week continues to be Russell Brand, post the expose in Dispatches in the Times and the Sunday Times. Brand has denied all the charges put to him on his YouTube channel, which he got out before the documentary aired. Charlotte, how have broadcasters addressed the reaction from the public so far?
So BBC and Channel 4 both seem really on it. Tim Davie and Alex Mahon have both kind of spoken about it at the RTS Cambridge convention and said, yes, we take this really seriously. They've pulled a lot of stuff, which I was surprised by how quickly that happened. A lot of content involving Russell Brand by both channels has come down from online. I guess we'll have to wait and see whether that ever reappears or maybe they'll do more editing and put other things back up. I think that's still unclear. And I think that is a question of kind of for future, like potential other allegations and investigations, whether you should erase stuff rather than maybe put some sort of... I think it's easier with like a website article, because maybe you could just put something at the top saying, since this was published, this has come to light. I guess it's different for a whole episode of TV. But I do think that's an interesting question of kind of the public record of content.
Does it need a person on before the programme going, this represents different times when we were all idiots and couldn't see what was in front of our face?
I mean, maybe that's kind of what they're doing for like things on Disney Plus, for example, when something's a bit racist now.
Episodes of the Muppets with smoking in it have that sort of stuff. So.
He hasn't really been on UK television a lot, and most of that sort of more recently, and it kind of came to an end. This is Comedy Central's roast battle when Catherine Ryan maybe sort of held him to task, though we didn't really see it on the TV. It didn't really make the edit. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that his sort of pivot to being a kind of right-wing anti-vax commentator was him thinking a little bit about all this stuff coming out. Does that kind of give him too much credit?
I think what happens in these situations a lot more is that the potential avenues they have to maintain a career narrow off. They get choked. So what you end up with is, if you feel like you can't get a break on television anymore, you set this up, you become the sort of owner of your own brand, no pun intended, and then you're much more inoculated from any sort of external forces, any external producer or a story breaking that will can take your audience away from you, basically. So I feel like it's not so much foresight as an inevitable consequence of burning so many bridges in various places. I mean, one of the reasons these stories keep happening and why they take so long to come out, I think, is because of the fragmented way that a lot of media works. There's a lot of freelancers operating within production companies. Broadcasters have their own people in-house, and as we've seen with a few other high-profile presenters who have been the focus of these stories, one who was arrested a few months ago, they've made quite good livings for themselves, moving from doing work in voiceover, doing work in theatre, doing work in publishing, doing work you can jump from place to place. And because everybody working there, there's a lot of people on freelance contracts or who don't want to rock the boat or end up being penalized for speaking out, and then that causing them other repercussions. And great people can, whispers can start. People think this is maybe not a great person to employ, but nothing formal happens, so that one individual company stops employing them, but they're then free to go and work somewhere else. And it's only until you reach a sort of critical mass of places where they burnt bridges that enough people start talking to each other. And sometimes, the network of the gossip network that sort of a lot of this relies upon takes 10, 15 years for someone who worked in a place to cross paths with someone else who worked in a place and say, oh, that happened to me, or I know someone that did that.
And also when there's been other whistleblowers, that becomes encouraging for other people to step forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I mean, I think one of the big problems is that people feel very exposed that they might be the only one that bears the brunt of this, and they become the face of this story. And that's a terrifying thought.
I mean, Charlotte, also there's a lot of legal worries, aren't there, to bring some of this stuff up with people who have very deep pockets.
I liked how the Times had like 2 solid paragraphs quite high up their story, just like laying out all of the things they'd had to do to bring the story to publication and kind of make that point that, this wasn't just like a thing we've knocked up in a month. It really is 4 years of work. And yeah, it's scary. I mean, Catherine Ryan, you've already mentioned her. When she was interviewed by Louis Theroux and kind of alluded to it, she did make the point of, the person she's talking about has deep pockets and may well want to, take legal action if she said anything. And obviously the same applies for publishers. And during a kind of economic tough times, publishers, broadcasters aren't going to be taking unnecessary risks, but they all have amazing lawyers. I enjoyed seeing the Times's legal director, I think, kind of credited by some of the journalists, because and it shows how much the lawyers have an input in these types of stories and really help them to publication. So it's really valuable.
I mean, Chris, you can understand when the public get annoyed by this. I was looking at some of the comments on Twitter about Russell Brand, and there's a lot that say, if you've known about this all along, why is it taking so long for it to come out? I mean, you can see why this kind of also plays into the sort of don't trust the media side.
It's a real bonfire of conflicting factors, right? Because all of this does sort of then play into a theory of I'm being silenced. This is a conspiracy against me. Which Russell's very happy to talk about and encourage. Yes, absolutely. And so in his statement, he was saying this feels like a coordinated attack. And maybe it does feel like that to him. So that is, I suppose, in one sense, a truthful statement. However, the fact is, a lot of these journalists work on these stories. You don't really have enough, or you have 60% of the story, and it's not enough to satisfy your lawyers. So you can't push it over the line. You suddenly find out that there's another organization working on a similar story, maybe have a missing piece that you don't. You can share things. It looks like a coordinated attack. The truth is that you've both been looking for the same puzzle pieces. And when you do, it bolsters you, and you can move forward in lockstep. But then that does risk looking like the MSM have joined forces, strange bedfellows deciding to unite against a bigger enemy. Well, one of the things I found kind of interesting about this is, one of the arguments, or the defenses of him, is like he's building up an audience and it's causing the establishment media to get scared.
Yes.
Like he poses a real threat to them. I was looking at the sort of YouTube numbers that he was getting, and I know Rumble is a sort of separate platform, but his YouTube numbers really haven't changed a huge amount since the days he was doing the Trues and that Ed Miliband interview. I remember when that was happening, around that time. It's gone up since, but it got about 500,000 views, 550,000 views, and that seems to be the kind of rough average that he's getting these days. I'm sure the audience is completely different. I don't think he's red-pilled an entire bunch of, Millibay fans, but it doesn't seem like he poses any more of a threat to establishment media than he did 8 years ago. But that, everyone was saying that he posed a great threat to the media then too. So
I mean, it's always
maybe
amusing.
That's all it takes.
It's always amusing when people think there's some great big conspiracy. These people have never worked in a newsroom where, as someone said on Twitter, we can't get the printer to work, let alone coordinate a secret cabal of all these stories. It just would never happen, would it?
No way. I mean, the Christmas rota, news and features accidentally doing the same story. It absolutely wouldn't happen.
Unfortunately, we are just MSM, so people will just assume this is part of the conspiracy. And actually, all of you listening at home, you're part of the MSM as well if you listen to the media podcast. Some industry folk who are having a natter this week in Cambridge were there for the RTS conference. I caught up with freelance writer Kate Bulkley, fresh from the conference, at a train station to find out exactly what the reaction's been.
Actually, it was really great. Channel 4 produced it, and it was a great lineup of speakers. Obviously, we got a bit derailed at the beginning by Russell Brand in the sense that everyone had to make a statement about that. But we got through that, including my interview with Tim Davie, of course, the DG of the BBC, and he talked about how when you look at something like Tim Brand, you have to think about not just process for how to get people to do complaints correctly or the ability to have a complaint system, but also about culture. And that, of course, takes leadership. And when I asked him, are you ruling out an external review? Because they've already announced an internal review. He didn't rule that out. So I think that they're taking this very seriously, as is ITV, as is Channel 4, which has launched their own investigation into this, as has the now owner of Endemol, Banijay. So, we'll see more on Russell Brand.
Everyone's sort of in the same boat, aren't they, broadcaster-wise? They've all got some brand exposure.
Yeah, brand exposure. That's good, Matt. Exactly. And, should more have been done at the time? Tim Davie said, at the time we were talking about Sachsgate. Remember Andrew Sachs? And we did a proper process through that. And that's why Russell resigned, and also why Leslie Douglas, who was the controller of Radio 2 at that point, resigned. Should they have looked more at the time into these other allegations? It seemed to be an open secret that we've heard, obviously, from the Times and the Channel 4 dispatch investigations now. Probably, but as he said to me on stage, I was only there a month as the head of radio at that point in audio, and we did the process properly that we had in front of us, and that's where we are. So
obviously that dominated a little bit. What else was the core talking points? So I think like TV Festival, lots came up about jobs, particularly in factual. What was the key stories at RTS?
Well, remember, this is more kind of big strategic session. So obviously we had the Secretary of State come and give a very nice speech. I'd say I'm very relieved that we have Lindsay Fraser, who is actually a knowledgeable Secretary of State. She talked about how to maximize the potential in the media industry. She talked about growing the creative industries in this country to by 50 billion by 2030. She talked about a pipeline of talent supporting that. She talked about 1 million new jobs. So clearly she knows that this is an important part of the economy. The government knows it's an important part of the economy. And of course, the question that the industry wants is, what are we doing on the media bill? How important is street prominence? It's very important. It's going to be part of the media bill. She definitely said that. And now the DCMS is going to be looking into the future of TV distribution, which of course is a very big topic, because of course how TV is distributed is becoming more and more online. How do we regulate that if we can? It's just also going to be looking into AI. So I think those are all good things. I think most of us were fairly happy about his position of government. One thing that was funny was Carolyn McCall, who of course runs ITV, was asked about, how's the advertising business going? And of course, it's not going very well. And it doesn't look like we're going to have a bump up in advertising as had been predicted earlier in the year, which is bad, of course, if you're a commercial broadcaster. And so Caroline said, what the government needs to do is fix the economy. So that got a little bit of a emotion around it, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so she said, fix the economy and all boats will rise.
And there seems to be quite a bit of AI discussion.
Yes, AI was brought up quite a few places in the conference, but there was a particularly good session about how some of this AI, generative AI, which of course is different than machine learning. Generative AI is AI that actually learns and it's computing so fast. It's the chat GPT and Claude, all those. We had a really interesting session where they actually replaced the face of a presenter onto Alex Mahon, who's of course the CEO of Channel 4, live on stage. And it was very realistic. I mean, scarily realistic. So this is the same company that worked on, for example, the Tom Cruise fake that many people have seen. So it's that kind of technology. But the issues that they talked about, of course, are, is it scary or is it a good thing? And of course, it's a good thing in the sense that it's going to make some mundane jobs in terms of production, in terms of in news, sort of what I would call mundane news stories, sports scores. You don't have to have a live person doing that. Metadata inputting. You don't have to have a human do that. So those are kind of things that are going to be great. On the other side, it's like, how fast this is developing, what is it going to be able to do, and where is it going to take us, both creatively and also as let's say, a disruptor to how we've been doing creativity so far. And of course, depending on who you talk to, you get different views on the goodness or badness of that. If I can use that, goodness and badness. But the thing we have to focus on is the data, because if we don't own our own data, and I'm not talking about you and me, Matt, but I'm talking about actors, writers, anybody who's creating something, that's going to be a problem, because all this data is going to be sucked up by the system. It's going to learn from our data. It's going to be able to exploit our data, our images, our voice, our acting, whatever it is. And so that's something that needs to get sort of sorted out pretty quickly. I'm not sure who's going to do that, but it's certainly something that I came away with, that we need to figure out how to do that. So it's not just about, is it a good or bad thing for creativity? It's about, what do we do about the data?
And finally, just before we let you jump on a train, the news broke of Rupert Murdoch sort of semi-stepping back to be chairman emeritus of Fox News and News Corp. Did that cause a little ruffle in the room when his email went out?
Yes, it did, actually. It's interesting you said that, because, of course, we were all sitting in a session with James Corden, who's come back to the UK, after his 8-year run in the US. And he was talking about what he's going to do next, or what he's not doing anything right now next, because he's basically trying to get his kids in school and get reacquainted with the UK. And suddenly everybody's phone started pinging. And the news came across that Rupert Murdoch is going to stand down and become chairman emeritus. And Lachlan, his son, will take over both companies. I mean, that is a very long run that he's had. As long as I've been reporting on media, I've been covering him. I think his influence is over 6 or 7 decades, if you think about it. It's a real changing of the guard. It's one of those interesting moments. And notice that they are announcing it on a day just before the weekend coverage. So I think there'll be a lot of Murdoch stories coming up.
Thanks, Kate, for joining us, and we'll see you in the studio soon.
You're welcome.
That was Kate Bulkley. We'll be back with more after this short break. if you're up for more on Rupert Murdoch, including a very spicy anecdote about saving Rupert Murdoch's life, go no further than the latest episode of The Two Matts. You might remember we had hosts Matt Kelly and Matthew Dancona on the show a few weeks ago. So go download their podcast from the New European. It's called The Two Matts. There's a link in the show notes. And Chris and Charlotte are back with me, and it's back to the local media crisis. No, not in radio this time. Instead, it's the press. Journalists at National World Titles were on strike today. That's Friday. The second of 3 days of industrial action. What's been going on?
So it's basically overpay.
And what are the National World Titles, if people aren't sure?
Yes, so National World used to be, once upon a time, Johnson Press, then JPI Media, then a couple of years ago it was bought by David Montgomery, who used to be the boss of like Local World and some of the Trinity Mirror, which is now Reach.
Easy.
Easy, yeah.
There will be a print-off PDF for me to track all of this.
Sorry, everyone. But some of the titles they own, like The Scotsman, Yorkshire Post, Yorkshire Evening Post, Sheffield Star, Portsmouth News, that sort of thing. So now you're up to speed. They had I think it was a 4.5% pay offer, which is obviously below inflation. So the union, the NUJ, were not happy about that. And National World have basically said, we can't give you any more, or we'll threaten the business if we give you any more. And they've said that's not good enough. So yeah, as you say, on the day this comes out, they'll be on their second day of strike. And between the strike dates, they're also doing the work to rule, not working beyond your contract or sort of unpaid overtime, etc. Which
that's sort of half the output.
Exactly. In local news, that's standard pretty much. Something across the board now, really, in terms of pay unsatisfaction. I mean, this time a year ago, Reach, which is the biggest local publisher in the UK, had a strike. Again, that was overpay. They did resolve it. This year, there was the NUJ kind of reluctantly accepted the pay offer that they got given, but they did kind of vocally make the point that they didn't love it. And at National World as well, there have been redundancies the past few months. So, yeah, there's a bit of unsatisfaction at the moment. There was even a vote of no confidence in David Montgomery.
He's never been a loved figure, has he? No.
I mean, Private Eye is quite a not very nice nickname for him. So, yes, it's all just a bit. It's not a very nice time.
Is it a National World particular problem? Because like NewsQuest's sort of revenues have been up recently, haven't they? Is it a company and where they operate, or is it just how their business is run?
It's definitely across the board, at least a bit, in terms of none of them pay isn't crazy high, although I think some of them have been putting it up more than others. The NUJ did criticise NewsQuest for how much it pays its BBC-funded local democracy reporters, but NewsQuest kind of hit back and said, well, we do need to cover our kind of employment costs as well. We can't give them all the money. So, and then other publishers actually kind of also said, yeah, that's a fair point from NewsQuest, actually. It is something going on. I think, National World is kind of just the current flashpoint, I would say.
Let's go over to the media quiz. This week it's entitled The Numbers. I'm going to give you a number. All you have to do is tell me the story behind that number. Oh. So buzz in with your name if you know the answer. So Charlotte, you'll say
Charlotte.
And Chris, you'll say
Chris.
Here we go. First number, 100.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. What is 100?
The Radio Times.
Correct. This is it celebrating 100 years of being the Bradshaw of broadcasting, which apparently is some cricket reference. Anyone?
Oh, no. My mind went to Carrie Bradshaw.
If only.
Radio Times has changed a lot since I was scaring it.
It's kind of remarkable it's still going in a sort of online world, isn't it? I mean, it's the most profitable part, I think, of a media.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, though, because you think print magazine, no one's buying it anymore. And yes, the newsstand sales have gone down a lot, but the past few years they've been building the subscriptions. So you're getting people who think, well, I do still enjoy the tradition of sitting down one day a week, going through, planning what I might watch next week. And I guess it is kind of that escape from online. And obviously they do have a website that they've been kind of building, and
that sort of runs separately, doesn't it?
It's surprisingly separate compared to like other operations nowadays. But they can do stuff with the website that they wouldn't with the magazine, and it does seem to work. And obviously they can share some stuff, but like the website does gaming, for example, which the magazine doesn't. And the website can be much more like what's on tonight, or what's, you know, what do you need to know now, rather than as I say, the magazine's more about like sitting down, and it doesn't matter when in the stretch of a few days you do it, like, but you can take that time. And I mean, there's been a few stories we've done recently about people enjoying a kind of curated experience, whether that's print or digital, but it's just a different experience.
It's important, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the Radio Times is specific.
Are you a Radio Times reader, Chris?
Not anymore, but
Christmas?
It literally coloured my
I did get it at Christmas.
experience. I think I still, to this day, and I'm probably not going to be very good if you test me on this, but I feel like I associate colours with the days, and I think they're the Radio Times ones. So red for the Saturday, you got pink for your Thursday, kind of tealish, turquoisey colour for your Friday. You know, I really, orange for the Monday. You know, they've changed, I'm sure, but, you know, that was the era I was reading, and I definitely get a sense of that. It's really shaped me. You know, reading Barry Norman's little film, just the kind of little paragraphs on each, I think there was a period of time where even if I haven't seen the film, I'm fairly... you know, got a sense of when it came out or how many stars it got. Just sort of information that I absorbed from this.
I think it's definitely one of those bits of media, I suppose I was growing up in the sort of 80s, that was like a family media. Like at that time, you had to get both the Radio Times and the TV Times because they didn't have the listings for everything together. So you got the Radio Times for the BBC listings, the TV Times for ITV. And yeah, so it's a big part of people's lives. You can see why it still does well. Right, question number 2, 50 million. What does that mean? 50 million. I think it's a tough one. This is the amount of dollars that Rupert Murdoch thought it would cost Fox News in their defamation lawsuit with Dominion. Can you remember the number that it did actually cost him?
God. 875 million, something along those lines? Is it more than that?
780 million, 778.
I'll give you the bonus point, Charlotte, for that. It is $787.5 million. Right. This is from Michael Wolff's new book on Trump. Do you see any other revelations from the book? Have you seen any coverage of it?
I've read a couple of extracts so far.
He does like churning them out, doesn't he, Michael Wolff?
Yeah, I've sort of reached Wolf saturation, I think.
I didn't finish the last Trump one I started reading.
I mean, he does seem to get the responses. I mean, there's a little bit of, does he slightly extend the truth, isn't there, on some of these things?
The extracts I was reading, I was like, obviously his sources are incredible, but how can he know that every minute detail? It's almost like The Crown, I guess, where you know the bones and then you like build a scene around it. So I just always leave wondering, like, I'm sure the gist of this happened, but is every word I'm reading
dialogue
here right?
is very, very particular.
Okay, question number 3, which is a ratings question, bit of a clue there. 15 million. 15 million. Hard questions this week. This is some ratings in France.
Oh, Charlotte.
Yes.
Rugby World Cup's doing really well.
Yes, this is France versus New Zealand. The opener got 15 million viewers. Is men's rugby the new women's football?
I mean, I did see a story about how the organisers were really surprised at how well the games are doing. And
when the organisers are surprised, that's quite the worry.
And I honestly don't know what the reason is. I've been watching it because my husband loves it. And so I've watched more than I actually expected. But I honestly don't... Do you know why it's higher than expected? I don't know.
Rugby fan?
No, not in the slightest.
Well, if you do know at home, get in touch. The Media Podcast. Right. Thanks to you both. Thanks to Chris and Charlotte. Where can people keep up with your good work?
Pressgazette.co.uk, or I'm still on Twitter/X at Charlotte Tobitt.
Chris?
If you want to get the Popbitch newsletter, popbitch.com is the best place to sign up for it Thursday afternoons.
Thank you both.